Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching. Well, today's video is pretty exciting for me because I get to kind of pre-release a brand new product for you guys that's coming from Anderson Ford Motorsport. Just kind of preface this, one of the things I'm most proud of working with Anderson Ford Motorsport is coming up with new products that serve a purpose. And this new product here does just that. So what I have on the table here is a brand new set of fuel rails that Anderson Ford Motorsport will be selling very, very soon. And you guys kind of see right now that they're in this beautiful purple anodized finish, and they look amazing. The reason that we went with purple on this set here is because the mascot colors for Anderson Ford Motorsport have been yellow and purple since 1989 when they first started, and it's kind of been an ongoing theme. And we decided to kind of come back and do a little bit of a heritage run, I guess you can say. So this is our Heritage Purple Edition. And we're doing a small run of these because that does cost a little bit more to do a smaller run of a odd color like this versus just like something like a anodized black. So these new fuel rails will be available in a small run of Heritage Purple and also anodized black. The black also look very, very good. Be sure to take a look at those here very shortly. So besides just talking about the color, I also want to talk about a bunch of key features that these rails represent over, say, something like this, which is kind of what your industry standard is. This is a trick flow fuel rail. This is also produced by Automotive, and so those are two major brand companies that you've seen out there, been around for a long time. So what I want to do is kind of compare what the old style and current style is versus what these new fuel rails will bring to the market. So let's take a nice deep dive into what these rails are, and then we'll install these into my car. Okay, let's talk about the key features, key differences between, say, your standard rails versus our new Anderson rails. So this is what you would say is your industry standard fuel rail. As you can see here, this trick flow rail pretty much represents most of the aftermarket rails you see out there for a small block Ford. You have your injector ports on the flat of your rail here. You also have flat mounting brackets here that bolt to the intake manifold. You usually have your open ports front and rear, and then also on the driver's side rail you'll have an additional port right here, and that's important for these type of rails, and I'll explain why here in just a second. So setting those aside, that's just the design aspect of these rails. The Anderson rails here, you can see the ports are actually at an angle. They're not on the flat, and that's by design. Also, you can see here the mounting brackets are also at an angle. You can see that here. Look at that. So what that does is that instead of bolting to the intake manifold like the Automotive rails or the trick flow rails, those would be mounted like this to the rail. Whereas these, the way that the ports are for the injectors and also the mounting brackets, it actually turns them like this. And look how much sweeping range you get by just doing that. So you gain all that additional clearance from your distributor to be able to mount these without having to run the bottom port. So let's take a step back to these rails here real quick. This bottom port is there because on these rails, without doing any additional spacers or something along those lines to make them clear your distributor, you have to run a bottom line here, bottom fuel line, to be able to wrap around back to your fuel pressure regulator. Main problem with that is that you could possibly starve cylinder number 5 up the front here. You see this port on most of the rails on the market puts it between the number 7 and number 6 port, but also number 5 is way out here, kind of being left alone. You could run some additional spacers and washers to help this rail get out a little bit better, but you then put your injector at a really odd angle. So with the Anderson rails here, this will help keep the standard angle the way the ports are and the way the brackets are. It'll help keep that injector angle more in the vertical position that it likes without having to try and pinch the O-ring or anything along those lines, helping greatly improve your sealing function of your O-rings. And also the port fitting sizes are still -8. So as you can see here, these are still -8, just like the Automotive and trick flow rails, so you can still flow plenty of fuel. And also, of course, these can handle any kind of fuel you put in it, E85, any ethanol based fuels, race gas, pump gas, whatever. So yeah, that's the main design feature and main design differences. And you can see here the extra cuts and stuff along those lines to be able to help clear the distributor and that way you don't have to run a bottom port. As you can see, these rails do not have a bottom port like the trick flow rails or aeromotive rails, because you can utilize both the front and rear port. That way you can loop a line to the front of these back to your fuel pressure regulator and have even disbursement of fuel and fuel pressure across all 8 cylinders. So that is the main design function difference between, say, your standard rails on the market and our new Anderson rails. So not only are they sound good in theory, they look really good. Let's go ahead and show you guys how these installed on a car so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Let's get these bad boys on my 87 Mustang. Okay, one of the things I highly recommend is actually going ahead and putting your fuel rails together first before you actually install these into the car. As you can see, I went ahead and installed my fuel adapter fittings, dash 8 to dash 6. They are 4 innovations and they look amazing on this purple. And also, I highly recommend installing your fuel injectors into the rails first before you install them back into the car. Main reason is, and if you look at some of these ports here, they're really close to an edge and they can get awfully sharp. And you don't want to, cut into an O-ring or anything along those lines. So I highly recommend installing your fuel injectors first into the rail before you set them into the car. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my fuel injectors and get those placed in, and then we'll get these bad boys installed into the car. Okay, so we got our fuel rail in here. Now, another thing I recommend is that having your fuel lines ready to go on each end, so that way you can get those started by hand. That way it's less of a bind and you don't have to worry about trying to screw with those fittings to get them on. So let's go ahead and get this rail installed, and then we'll get our fittings loosely installed. Okay, just make sure all the wiring is out of the way and everything. Now that these are loosely in their spots, I'm going to go ahead and get the fuel lines started in the front and rear. Then we can really cinch these things down, plug this side in, and then we can move on to the other side. Just like that. I mean, that just fits in there so nice, because it was made for it. I'm just going to go ahead and get those hands started. Not going to fully seat them yet. Want to wait till both are in. There's one. There we go. All right. Both bolts have been started. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply pressure down on the rails, make sure that everything's fully seated, and fully torque those down. All right, just real quick, let's show you guys the daylight. There it is. You have daylight between the distributor and your fuel fitting. That's right, these are fully snugged down. As you can see, the injectors are not at any odd angle. They're exactly where they need to be. All right. And yep, you got daylight between the distributor and your front fuel fitting. So you'll be able to fit a dash 8 fitting in there, no problem. In dash 6, I have plenty of room. So, yep. These things work. Let's move on to the other side and finish this job up. Okay, the other side is in. The only thing I had to really fight was the heater core hose. Just, as you can see, the heater core tube here, it's really tight up against one of the injectors. So, one of the things that you'll just have to kind of fiddle around with. It all fits. And as you can see right here, there is a ton of room between the distributor and this side. So this side will actually be a little bit of the easier one to install. Alright, I got all the lines tight. Just need to confirm that there's no fuel leaks, and I'll get the intake back on and finish this thing up. Okay, everything's put back together, and you can see the passenger side pretty clearly. It's got an awesome reflection on the black. You can see it in there. Now unfortunately you can't really see the driver's side too much. Just a little remnant in there, but different style intake manifold, like say a box R from Trick Flow or something would look, you'd be able to see these things clear as day. But what you do see looks pretty darn amazing. Fitment is excellent, and I couldn't be happier with this with these rails. Okay, so that's going to wrap up the installation. As you can see, it's not much different than any other fuel rail that's out there. Just a couple things to note to help make your life a little bit easier. Again, just installing those fuel fittings at the beginning along with the fuel injectors will just make life a little bit easier for you. And also, one other thing to note that I didn't mention at the beginning is that the fuel rail brackets are actually adjustable. That's right, you get a little adjustment out of them because the holes are slotted. So that way, if you need a little less or a little more clearance, you can actually loosen the Allen keys on the back and get a little bit more clearance by moving up the rail if you need to. So that's another nice feature. Again, these fuel rails will be available through AndersonFordMotorsport.com in the Heritage Purple, which is what you saw in the installation here, and a nice anodized black. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my content, please like, please share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that way you don't miss out on any new content coming to the channel. Take care. See you in the next video.